Hey, New Life. So we're continuing to discover how do we live our lives in light of Jesus's resurrection. And today I want to talk a little bit about his prayer in the garden. I have a friend who caddies on the PGA Tour, and he and I were talking once about professional golfers and professional athletes in general. And he made a statement to me that really has stuck with me. He said that in moments of tension and stress and crisis, we fall back on our basic habits. And when we come to looking at Jesus praying in the garden, we really see this principle at work. Now, often we approach Jesus's life thinking that he's kind of this Superman character. You know, he wears the glasses to look like Clark Kent, but at the end of the day, he can rip open his shirt, have the S on his chest, and he gets to escape out of every situation. But that's not what the New Testament says. The New Testament says that Jesus learned obedience through what he suffered. And to really understand the crisis that he finds himself in when he goes to the garden to pray, we need to look a little bit at the setting of this place of prayer. Luke tells us that this was on the Mount of Olives. Mark calls it the Garden of Gethsemane, but we really don't know where exactly that is. We do know where the Mount of Olives is. The Mount of Olives sits as the eastern boundary of the city of Jerusalem. Now, Jerusalem sits up in the hill country of the land of Israel, and just east of the Mount of Olives, that hill country begins to descend down towards the Jordan Valley and the Dead Sea. And what that means is east of the Mount of Olives is the rain shadow. You literally can sit on the top of the Mount of Olives, and to the west is green grass, and to the east is dry, yellow rock and desert. And one of the things that we know throughout the Bible's history is that this area was known for a place of hideouts and refuge, especially for those that don't want to get caught by the authorities. When Jesus is praying on the mountain, he could walk 1 hour and disappear into this wilderness. Pilate and Caiaphas would not be able to touch him. Understand it this way: when he prays in the garden, he is standing at the doorway of escape. Think about that for a moment. He knows what's coming. He knows what's ahead of him: the cross, the suffering, the mocking, the beatings. And he's right there at the door of escape. But what would have been Jesus's habit? We know from first century sources that Jewish boys, from the time they were very young, all the way through their manhood, would have recited Deuteronomy 6:4-9. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one, and you will love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and strength. They would have done this at least once, if not twice, every day. And more than that, in reciting that, it was said that they are accepting upon themselves God's rule and reign, because by acknowledging him as Lord and determining that I will love him with all my heart, soul, and strength, I'm establishing the fact that he's the king and I'm not. He gets to make the rules and I get to follow them. It's a simple relationship. Jesus would have done that every day of his life. What kind of habit had he formed? He had established a habit of daily submission to God's rule and reign in his life. It wasn't about just looking for that great moment, but it was in the ordinary and in the mundane, pursuing excellent obedience to God that prepared him for this moment of crisis. And in this moment of pressure and stress and tension and agony, when he prays, as we read in Luke 22:41, Father, if you are willing, remove this cup from me. Nevertheless, not my will, but your will be done. Had he not prepared every day by submitting his will to God's, in this moment, he would have run, but he didn't. He turned his back on the wilderness, the door of escape, and turned to face the cross because of his habitual obedience to God's rule and reign. Do you and I practice that every day? Do we seek every day to bring everything in our lives under God's rule and reign? Not just in our devotions, but in the way that we do business, in the way that we carry out our work in our workplace, in the way that we study if we're a student, in the way that we parent, in the way that we are with our spouse. Do we seek to bring every aspect of our life under God's rule and reign and in accordance with his will? If we don't, we cannot be expected when those moments of crisis and temptation come to do God's will. It's in the ordinary, the daily grind of life, that we build up our ability to submit to God's will in moments of stress, in crisis, and even in temptation. God doesn't remove us from those moments. But if we have habituated our obedience to him, when those moments come, we can submit to God's will just like Jesus did. We can turn our back on the door of escape and face towards whatever God's will is in our life. And that's how we need to live our lives today in light of Jesus's resurrection. Have a great day, everyone.